Hey, what's going on everybody? Welcome back to the channel. My name's JBO. I hope you're having a great day. If you are new to the channel, this is my 1992 Toyota MR2 and this is the 3S GTE engine that we pulled out of the car a couple of days ago. So on today's video, I think we're going to start getting into some sort of like an engine teardown kind of thing. I've already started pulling apart the wiring loom here. So normally when I sort of pull these looms off of engines and stuff, I like to take the extra step and go around and start naming and labeling all the sort of plugs I'm taking off. I've started with the spark plug leads here. It is labelled on the distributor to where they go. However, it always pays to just be sure with the lengths and things like that. I've also down here started to label like the temperature senders, the MAF sensor, fuse box leads and things like that. The coil that goes to the distributor there as well. And on the other side, go around to here. I've also gone ahead and started labelling the EGT, O2 sensor, intercooler fan and the AC plug down there as well. Some of these plugs I won't need to use anymore, such as I believe the AC one and this EGT one here, because those will get deleted when I take the AC off and the downpipe as well. Shooting around to the back of the engine here, you can see that there is the turbo pressure sensor which sits on the back of the firewall there. That, along with some alternator plugs and the plugs that go to the downpipe, all go up inside the intake there, and that's where all the sort of, I guess, fuel injector plugs will go. So I think it might be a good call to take this intake manifold off just to get to the rest of the plugs, which is something I have been meaning to do anyway, just so we can get those gaskets changed out as well, but that'll make the job a lot easier. So I'm probably going to start by taking off the throttle body mechanism and the traction control mechanism. This traction control is a pretty old style of traction control that uses like throttle position and like vacuum sensors and stuff like that. It's pretty old school, it doesn't work too great, but it's a really rare option to get on these cars. So I'll get started by just taking this part off and this part off, and then that'll help me undo these plugs down here. And then once I've done that, then I can get started on taking the intake manifold off and we should be good to go. So it's actually the next day. I was going to do a time lapse of taking the throttle body off the engine, but the battery died on the camera, so I decided to just go ahead and take it off anyway. I'll just quickly show you what I've done. So this is the factory sort of throttle body inlet for MR2 turbos. Most turbo MR2s won't come with this unit. This is the traction control unit. And this is the main sort of throttle body. If you look down here, for those of you who have never seen a old style traction control unit, there's actually a secondary butterfly here that the traction control uses. So the traction control unit actually has its own throttle position sensor on this side, like the normal throttle body does on that side. To my knowledge, this throttle body only uses one gasket, which is this one here, and that's where the throttle body mates to the intake manifold. So between this part here and this middle part and this throttle body, it doesn't really use a gasket. It uses like a waxy, rubbery sort of gasket that's like built into the housing of it. Yeah, so now that the throttle body's off and I've got a new battery in the camera, we can actually go ahead and start taking off the intake manifold. Once this is off, we can get the engine harness off and we might get started on taking the turbo and the exhaust manifold off as well. Finally got the intake manifold off, and it was a bloody nightmare, I tell you. There were a few 12mm bolts that just wouldn't come out, and I couldn't find a good 6-sided one to sit on the bolt, so I had to use a multi-sided socket, and it kept slipping off. But I've got the intake manifold right here. So you can see that the wiring harness for the engine is bolted on the inside of the intake manifold there, which basically meant I had to take the whole intake manifold off to get to it. It probably would have been doable, but it's a lot easier when you take it all off at once. You can also see that each intake runner has 2 ports, which is used for the T-Vis system that a lot of these Gen 2 3S GTE engines came with. And I'll just show you down here what it looks like. So you can see that each intake runner has a butterfly valve on every second port. What this means is at lower RPM, when the butterfly valve is closed, there's a higher velocity of air going through the one port, and this helps to bring sort of torque and power up a bit at lower RPM. As the RPM increases to about 4,500, I think, around that sort of area, the butterfly valve opens up and this allows more air and boost from the turbo to go into the engine, and that helps to bring the power and the torque up at higher RPM. Cool, so in the last clip you can see that I actually got the throttle body and stuff bolted back to the intake manifold. That was last night, so today's actually a new day. I've just finished work and I've gone and picked up some new bolts so that I can mount the engine to the engine stand, as you can see here. So these 4 bolts use a metric fine thread like most bolts on MR2s. These are actually M12 by 1.25 I believe. I got them in about, I think it was 90mm long. This is so that I can mount the engine stand face there to the engine block. So what I think we're going to do next is we're going to take the clutch and the flywheel off the engine. That way we can get it mounted on the stand and it'll make taking the turbo and the manifold off way easier. So we'll get started on that. So this is the clutch and the flywheel that I've just taken off the engine. As you can see, this one is an Exceed unit. It is an OEM replacement one, but it looks to be in pretty good condition. It's not really damaged as far as I can see. There's still grease inside the splines there. The flywheel looks in pretty good shape too. There's no sort of heat spots here, and there's none, as far as I can see, on the clutch plate either, which is pretty good. So these must have been done probably not long before I actually owned the car. Cool, so I'm probably now just going to chuck the face of the engine stand on the engine block and get it mounted up. Once that's done, I'll take a look at the engine and decide whether I want to take the turbo manifold off in this episode as well. Cool, so we've gone and got the engine on the stand now, which will make taking the turbo downpipe and manifold off a lot easier. What's involved in taking this off is taking off all the brackets that support the turbo and catalytic converter, as well as the oil feed and coolant lines. The oil feed line is this giant 30mm bolt, which you'll need a 30mm socket to take off. This hard line runs all the way under the turbo, and then you've got the oil drain, which is down here. You'll need to take those off. It also pays to undo the coolant feed lines there and loosen or take off the brackets on either side of the catalytic converter. It'll make it a lot easier if you take the catalytic converter off first, because then you can get to the bracket underneath the turbo, which is just down there, which you can't really access while this is still in place. So I've gone ahead and already loosened some of the bolts and taken them off to make this a bit easier. And then once that's done, we'll go up here, take off the manifold bolts, and hopefully it should all come off as one unit. Cool, so this is what the catalytic converter looks like on this engine. It is a big heavy thing with a lot of honeycomb mesh on the inside, as you can see. This is pretty restrictive as it's straight off of the turbo. It blocks a lot of the airflow and breathing ability of the engine, so it's never a bad idea to take it off. You could get $100 or so if you sell this to a wrecker as well. Cool, so I finally got the turbo manifold and downpipe off the engine. It wasn't the easiest thing to do. I mean, it didn't all go to plan, I guess. As you can see, this was my success rate with getting the nuts off and leaving the studs inside the head. I only managed to get 2 nuts off and all the rest came out attached to each other, so I'll have to figure out what to do there. But here she is, the big hulking piece of metal that is the factory turbo. So there's not a lot to really look at on this thing, but it does give us a closer look at the factory downpipe here. As you can see, this downpipe and elbow is real narrow here, and this, coupled with the catalytic converter that we took off earlier, makes for a really restrictive exhaust system and doesn't really allow the turbo to open up and get to its full potential, I guess. You can also sort of see the internal wastegate that the turbo has, which is here, and this has a rod running from this side down to the back of the exhaust housing, and there's a flapper inside the downpipe here, which I'll show you later on. I've plumbed up the left side of the wastegate to the compressor housing with some vacuum hose and a manual boost controller. I've blocked off the right side of the wastegate because that goes to the turbo vacuum switching valve, I believe, the TVSV, which I'll cover later on, I guess. But that normally sits just over here under the intake manifold around here. Yeah, so I'm really happy with the progress I've made in the last few days. I've managed to get the turbo manifold downpipe off, as well as the clutch and the flywheel here, and the intake manifold, throttle bodies, and the full wiring harness. And that leaves us with a mostly sort of bare block, which we can start really getting into in the next sort of videos. We'll start getting into the cam cover here and take a look at what that looks like. We'll start cleaning the block, start painting some things, and start replacing some gaskets. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It's probably going to be a bit of a longer one. This video was shot over the last 3 days. I don't have a lot of time to work on this thing, so I make do with the time that I've got. Yeah, we've got a lot of stuff coming up for the engine in the next few videos, so stay tuned. Let me know if you guys like this, let me know what you guys want to see, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace!